Cool, and thanks, Danielle. Cool. So we'll kick off with just regular business. So approving minutes. I've just got last meeting's minutes. All right, cool. So I don't know if anyone had a chance to review these, but I will ask the question. If anyone would like to approve the minutes.
I'll move it. Yeah.
So I hear Dushi and Michael can second. Anyone against approval? No. Anyone abstaining?
I abstain. I wasn't there.
Same. Angus and Andy abstaining, so 2 abstentions. And so they're passed. Excellent. And I wanted, okay, that's good. So we'll go on to other updates. So we've got
before we do that, you don't want to ask for approval of the other minutes?
I will.
That's part of it. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
We'll be doing that. Yeah. So yeah, cool. So just to note, the individual pronouns guidance we talked about at the last meeting, that was all approved with changes. That's all been merged and is now in. So I'll just say that's good if people want to have a look. It's in the current build. And back to minutes approval. We're going way back to the face-to-face meeting. And I was attempting to do this with an e-vote. However, I think we're a bit short on the e-vote numbers there, but we do have enough people here to possibly make this vote stick. So just of these attendees, I note here too in the e-vote, I'm going to count Jacob as an affirmative because he's already affirmed by e-vote. And I would like to ask someone to move and second on approval of this e-vote, of this vote.
I'll move it because I was scribed.
You were there. Thanks, Michael. And with someone second who was there. Thanks, Andy. And of the attendees, would I have anyone that wants to abstain? Angus and Dushi are abstaining. And anyone against approval? Oh, and Christy too. So 3 abstentions. Anyone against? That's anyone against. So they're passed, and we will call them approved finally.
What's your number going to be for approval though? For the minute taker.
So technically we'll call, for the minute taker, we'll call this, actually we'll go who was actually there. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. I've got no, yes, Marika, 3. I think I've only got 3 with 2 abstentions. No, I'm an abstention too. I would be an abstention, but I'm chair. I guess I can abstain for that.
So Michael's affirmative and Andy is affirmative, I thought, for this.
And Marika
and Richard.
And Richard, oh, you're here too, 4. Okay. So I've got 4.
And are you counting the e-vote that's recorded on the page, Brad?
Oh, yes, and Jacob.
So you said 5.
Yeah. That's 5 approval.
5. Thank you. Cool. 5 approval. So how many abstentions have we got? I was 1 already by e-vote.
You had 3.
And we had, yes.
You and Andy and Angus.
All right.
Of the attendees.
All right, cool. All right. Is that okay?
Yes,
I'm going to leave that
recorded.
alone. Thank you.
503.
I'm just very keen to pass those ones because they've been around for months. Just another update there. Oh, this is the name context extension eVote. So that went out to eVote, and we had a couple of referrals to Telecon. Do you think we should take this now, Danielle?
I would prefer not to, but
Yeah,
I've
I would
already
prefer
told
not
you
to.
that I would prefer to schedule that and provide people
into
with
the
notice
future.
as to which
Yeah.
telecom
Oh,
that's
yeah, I
going
said-
to be talked about,
yeah.
which was the next call.
Yes, that's good. We've put it. It's on the minutes on the agenda already here. So we'll push that off to the next call. So yeah, we'll come back to that one next time.
And then send out the agenda so that people can
Yeah.
come to that.
Yeah. Actually, I might request people that did want to refer if they could give us a hint as to what they would like to talk about. That would be helpful as well. So we can put it in the agenda to get an idea of what we're going to cover. So I might leave those updates there and move on to PSSs. So there's a project scope specifications that we kind of need to do, especially to support upcoming balloting. So we have this, we have a core PSS, which is effectively, I'll give people just a chance to look at this.
Yeah.
This is,
Did you email that out
set
to the FHIR Work Group?
only via the agenda.
Okay. I mean,
yeah.
there's not much different to what we expect. So
Yeah.
the PSS is confirming what I'd been broadcasting about timeframes. So, for R1, we are doing an R1 IG. We are intending to go through ballot for working standard and to target the August ballot with publication, I think January 2025. And to have that be twinned with the AU base, the expected dependencies, move past all that blah there. Although I guess actually just confirming scope for people, we've now in the AU core TDG kind of confirmed our R1 scope. That's what's in current integration. So that includes, it does include like patient and organization and practitioner role and practitioner. And it's got the AU core condition and allergy intolerance of medication resources. This time it's just medication request part. Anything else will be, so medication request and medication. Anything else is R2 in that space. And it's got immunizations. And then there's the observations that are associated with the AU CDI elements, which segues into the dependencies bit. So they're the same dependencies that we kind of called out in the beginning, being AU CDI R1, which is going to be published this month. The latest AU base, because I expect, which will be mentioned, I think, in what's coming out for the AU base PSS, it'll be twinned with that. And it's still FHIR R4, so no changes there. Anything else worth reconfirming? Just now we've got that new kind of base and core variants. There's no expected AU base variants. We're still proceeding on that basis.
Yeah.
And everything else is about the same from the very early draft of the PSS that first got kind of socialized last year sometime.
Yeah. Cool.
Any questions about the timeframes or intentions of scope really for AU core from a project scope statement perspective?
Is there a separate scope statement for AU base?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, there'll be one for each. There's one for each project. And base is managed as a separate project.
Yeah, so effectively this is to cover the R1 project which has been proceeding for the last period anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah, but this is to confirm essentially the R1 publication of AU Core.
Okay, as you said, as expected.
That's,
we
yes,
said.
this is
Basically,
not a surprise.
just
Yeah.
reconfirming that we haven't made any, there's no changes in either the timeline or dependencies or really expected outcomes. I think really the only interesting material changes, we firmed up our scope from where we had like it might be all of these things in R1, and now it's a much more concrete, smaller set. Otherwise, same.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah,
well, if there's
it's very
no
much.
questions or concerns about that, then I motion we approve the scope
Yes.
statement for R1 for AU
R1.
Corp.
Anyone willing to second?
I'll second it, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Anyone against?
Any further discussion? I was wondering if you could share the scope statement again for a second.
Sure can.
Okay. I was just looking for references of AUCDI in this. Are there any?
It's in dependencies
Oh,
and
it's
external
independent.
projects. Yeah, it's dependencies.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's listed as a
Yeah.
related. Yeah, as a related project. Yeah.
Yeah, as per your
Yeah.
previous feedback, Ruben.
All right. Thank you very much. Looks good.
Thanks, Drew. Okay, I'll call again. Anyone against? Okay. See anyone? Anyone abstaining? I see none. So that is a full count, which I have as 13.
Yep.
Sorry, I just noticed that the external project collaboration says AUCDI project. I'm
Mhm.
wondering if that shouldn't say Sparked.
No, there's rows for Spark. So developing organization and FHIR accelerator. Spark's mentioned in a few bits.
Yeah, it's the accelerator. Yeah.
Okay,
specific.
so I guess that raises another thing. Is Sparked an organization? Or should that not perhaps be CSIRO, ADHA, DOAC,
This is the
etc.?
changes we made based on the last piece of advice from, I guess, HL7AU people to put the FHIR accelerator in FHIR accelerator and developing organization. But I don't care. I'm not sure it really matters for the purposes of approval for what a PSS does. But if you would like specific changes, we can just fill out the fields in whatever way lets you approve it.
I actually think I think this is accurate in the sense it's yeah. I think
Well,
Spark is responsible.
It would be accurate if there was an organization named Spark, and there isn't. And I think it's appropriate that Spark is in the accelerator field, and
Yeah.
I'd probably put the 4 leading organizations in that developing organizations field if it were up to me.
Would you
Yeah, I
like to
agree.
request that change? Yeah.
Would
Yeah,
Spark,
sure.
with Ruben.
Sparked would meet the FHIR resource definition of organization, but it doesn't meet the usual definition of organization.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a developing community and then put Spark.
I'm happy to
Yeah,
list
I
the
think-
4 organizations, HL7AU, CSIRO, ADHA, and CSIRO, and then put like plus others.
Yeah. I think,
All right.
did you say CSIRO
Okay,
twice?
I hear you.
But
I didn't think so.
Are they all actually developing organizations? Is
Well,
the agency
Yes.
developing this?
Yeah.
Developing is.
The
Some of it
community
is.
is developing it.
Yeah.
It's a community, so it's developing community, I guess, is Sparked as a community, but I don't know.
The
Yeah,
4
okay, I think-
organizations are those that make up the Sparked organizations. So they would be the ones listed under developing organization if we replace Sparked.
Is it not just HL7 Australia?
I was wondering
Yeah.
about
Well,
that. Feels too hard. Is there a
Yeah.
definition for what developing organizations need to be? Because I think that there's a good argument that anyone that's participating in the TDG is eligible to be listed there, and we're not going to list everyone.
It's-
So
Well, it's a field we've inherited from the HL7 international form for PSSs.
Yeah. Let's just see if there's
I mean, we could just put a link there to everyone that's signed up as a participant, right?
I think that's why we originally put Sparked, to just go Sparked.
Okay.
Like all of Sparked, like Sparked is developing.
Okay,
that.
let's say Spark participating organizations then. Done.
Yeah.
Yeah. that looks-
okay. So I'll take that.
Take that
change
note
as
and
being-
I'll make it
yeah.
and I'll release a
So with
1.0.1 with the changing that to sparked participating organizations will be the wording.
Oh, can I suggest one other change?
Sure.
I think the reference to AU base should be 4.2.1 because that's where we're going to land on that sequence. Just
Sure,
because we're in
it
a
still
4.2.0
says
sequence.
Whatever
yeah.
the latest one will be though.
Yeah, or current. Yeah.
Damn it,
But
Brett.
if-
Why
if
did
we're
you
gonna
pull
ch-
on that string? Because now
if
I've
we're
just
gonna
identified
change-
another one. We need to add the extensions pack.
No, that already comes into AU base. We inherit it in core through base, the same with terminology and FHIR itself. The expansions pack is covered by both the FHIR standard and AU base. It's not a separate
You can get-
dependency.
You can get me in the next PSS for that one. The yep. So
All
yeah,
right.
can I yeah, it's that I just say with a friendly amendment AU base 4.2.1 instead of 4.3.0. Cool. Excellent.
And realizing, of course, that this is not the document that governs AU base versions. It may in fact be a different version. What's
Yes.
really important is that the dependency there, both for the AU core PSS and other PSSs, states like or like current version
That's
at the
current.
time this goes to. All right.
Yeah, indeed. All right. I'll call again based on those amendments. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Don't see anyone. Okay, we'll call that passed. And now is 14. Thank you for that. And we'll move on back to next item. Okay, so now we have also a plan to make an AU base release in this cycle. So to tick all the boxes, there's a PSS, particularly for the release version planned, next release version planned. So that is version 4.2.1. And we have a PSS for AU base. So I think, so basically this will be basically this general description. General description on what's going on there, which I don't think is a surprise what AU base is to anyone here. And basically the need to have a ballot to affirm changes since the 4.10 release, which is now some time ago, and essentially support the publishing of downstream standards, particularly AU core and e-requesting, as part of the Sparked Accelerator, but of course others. And yeah, so basically it's there to consolidate the agreed changes that have been made since the last trial use version. So this will be effectively an update to the 4.10 release, and we'll replace it as the current version. And the aim is to also put that into ballot in the August period and for a completion in January also. Danielle.
In project need, there's an IE, but it only lists AUCLA or any requesting. I thought PD had some links into this. So can we change the project need to either be EG or add PD?
I'm happily amenable to that, but would anyone else like us to mention PD explicitly?
I just don't like that IE says like just essentially just
Yeah,
those
for
two,
this.
and I don't think that's just,
Yeah, I agree with Danielle on that. It's sort of,
Yeah,
cool.
agreed.
Okay, that's cool. I think we'll just take that as consensus. So just an amendment there to, we'll just change IE to EG. Yep. All right, note that. And
what happened to 420? It says release 421 is for ballot. So I guess the thing is we've done 420 and we need to make some more changes. And the changes are insignificant enough that it's an update. It's a trivial update to 420.
Yeah, okay. I think we're basically, there's been a sequence since the last release and the numbers are a little weird, I grant you. But we didn't, so it's basically keeping in so we have a 4.10, so the next, we're actually aiming to get a trial use version out under 4.2 point something.
Okay, so and it won't be a 4.3 because the changes between 4.20 preview and this are minor enough that we don't go to 4.3.
Yeah, I think it was a desire to have an actual trial or release version made under 4.2. Yeah.
Which we don't have and haven't released.
Yeah, which we haven't.
So
we haven't done. We've got snapshots, but we haven't. Yeah.
Look, I'm comfortable leaving the versioning to depending on how the project plays out. And it's like a 4.2 plus type deal, I guess.
Yeah, it is. I think the thing is, we will do a snapshot at 4.2.1 ballot because we haven't. That will be the next 4.2 sequence.
So we'll have a 4.12 preview and then a 4.20 preview, and then we'll have a 4.21. Nothing further to say, or 4.21
one ballot. Yeah, and then
it'll be a 4.21 ballot.
It'll be 4.421. Yeah.
Ballot, and then after 4.21 ballot, we'll go to 4.21.
Yes, that will be essentially the end of the 4.2 sequence, and we'll go on to 4.3 after that. If we might consider the versioning is a little weird for AU base because it's been developed over various decisions made at various times. So I think we'll probably be hopefully be able to be a little more organized in the next sequence. So basically,
so this has got us doing. So we'll have 4.21 ballot in August, I guess.
Yep.
And then we'll have 4.21. Nothing more to say in January next year.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Can I just
once the reconciliation stuff. Yeah.
Because I've gone to the AU Core PSS, right, to update it based on the version. It actually says AU base 4.21.
Oh.
So I don't think I need to make a change. I think it is what you asked for.
Okay.
Cool. I'll just keep that in for dependency for AU Core is 4.21 or like current.
Yeah, it's current. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Cool. So there's no surprises here. I named some organizations, but obviously there are many more. So so there's definitely just some of the participants as well. Just some other interested parties. Now developing organizations, I don't know, I had to list somebody. So I guess it's a question of who would we like listed in so many ways. It's I guess it's depending on what you think developing means. Because
Are
we're
you an
all here.
organisation, Brett?
Yeah, I'm my own entity.
There's HL7 in there.
Well, nobody's actually working for HL7 Australia, so it's yeah, it's So I'll take advice on what people want to put in that box. So consider that. And I guess with dependencies, we could go into more detail here too.
Extensions pack.
Yeah, so I'll note that. So extensions pack.
Yeah, don't forget to have the all latest.
Yeah, all latest, and I can put the explicit R4 version we're using too. Yeah.
I think THO is probably going to need to be included there then as well.
Which also, of course, comes in automatically through IG Publisher stuff. But yeah,
yeah,
why not?
That's all right. We can list it. That's good.
What's THO again?
Terminology.hl7.org.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, extra packages. Cool. So note those as amendments.
So I guess this one, in terms of the developing organization, yeah, that's a funny one because while there's Sparked for core, Base has sort of got an even more nebulous group of parties doing it.
So for me, and a bit layman on this, why is Base not also Sparked? Like,
because it's not a deliverable under Sparked. We're contributing to it, but so are a bunch of other people who are just doing stuff. It's not our project in Sparked. Yeah. We use it, but
yeah. So Sparked needs it, but Sparked isn't responsible for it. It's HL7AU which is responsible, and lots of people volunteer their time and effort. So in a sense, there's no organization to point at and say you didn't do it. There's just you can point to an organization and say you didn't coordinate it. That would be HL7AU, but there doesn't seem to be anyone to point at and say you didn't do it.
So if we decide in Sparked we really need a change in Base, where are we going?
Oh, we'll make the change, but so would any other organization. We're not responsible for delivering Base. We just contribute to it like other people contribute to it. Sorry, Richard.
Yeah, that's basically what I was wanting to say. Yeah. Other people could come along and contribute other things to Base, and we'd if it didn't break stuff that was of relevance to AU Core, the thing would be fine, good, great, thank you.
But it's not open to slather, is it? Like, I mean, who
people
HL7 Australia again? Like, who guards what goes into Base and what doesn't? Like, who's
FHIR Work Group?
The committee.
It's the FHIR Work Group.
Yeah. So it's nothing goes into Base without approval.
At the moment, I think everybody who guards Base is also part of the team that produces Core. So there's this sort of huge overlap.
Yeah.
No, well, it's very huge overlap, but it's not the same, actually, set of people.
Yeah. So I think I took it more literally who are the entities that are doing the changes. So at the moment, it's CSIRO staff and me.
Who's paid to do it by CSIRO? Okay.
Oh no, I was talking more about but I think you're right. It should be. It is pretty. It's a little bit nebulous because it's basically it's a committee exercise. So
yeah. I suspect that part of the reason for having that field in HL7 stuff is to guarantee that is to find somebody to, in a sense, underwrite the effort to guarantee that the work will be done, that it won't just fade away like some things do. And I think that's the point of that. So to that extent, we don't actually need an organization as long as there's in a sense, an assurance that the work will be done.
Yeah, it's also an opportunity to declare potential bias as well.
Ah, yes, good point.
True. Yeah. Yeah, and I also read it as like being particularly developing the product release. So essentially in this cycle, it's about who's going to actually own the actual, making sure everything gets in there to a level. But
it's a FHIR Work Group. I
that,
guess that's what I come back to. It is volunteer, this one. We don't have an organization who is putting this, unless the agency wants to. I mean, I know you guys use it and contribute to it, but again, it's not one organization's like deliverable.
Yeah, it's almost the field that it's not helpful. Yeah,
I'll declare my bias here and say the best answer is HL7 Australia. Or leave it blank.
Right.
I put HL7 Australia in then.
Okay. Let's do that then.
Yay.
Take that. We'll take that as a change. Yes, stakeholders is another one. It's a bit of an open book there, but it's
I'm sure the agency is not the only stakeholder.
Yeah,
you could put Spark down as another stakeholder.
Yeah, true. All right.
Sparked and participating organisations.
I just listed types of organisations there for call, like, and I think that you can just copy that, like jurisdictions and other things. Sorry.
I don't think that projects and program can be stakeholders. Stakeholders has to be entities, such a person or organization.
Yeah.
I actually think we should leave the developer organization blank, because I think this is it is a risk, because it is, as you, Brett, said, HL7 Australia has no paid employees. So while they may do it with a hat of, I'm doing this as a community contribution for HL7 Australia, I think the reason why developing organizations is explicit there is so that we can recognize that if there is no organization that's actually fronting up with resourcing for the development, then we should make that explicit. Because I think otherwise we're kind of brushing it under the carpet that AU base is actually really important for the foundations, and we have no financial support or nominated support for it.
And leaving it blank makes that obvious to people outside the HL7 community that we talk to about this stuff. Yeah, while if we put in HL7 Australia, then while we might know that there's no funding, that won't be obvious when we're trying to argue the point with people outside the community.
I think that's a fair point, because it's effectively there's just shared responsibility, and I'm happy to.
If we are talking about projects, if this is a project, sorry that I John late, I haven't got the full context. So if we are talking about project proposal, then it's okay to leave the developing organization blank, but there should be project sponsors. Ultimately, project sponsors are the entity that will do the work. So I don't see any, from my international experiences, any project got any link to be approved if there isn't project sponsors and co-sponsors, and also project responsible entity that will be doing the work.
Cool. Yeah, so Stephen, this is really about the next release of AU Base. So, as a project, I think there's a case for someone to raise an issue with this element and maybe consider that
we're leaving it blank.
But
like
for blank, I think I think there's no specific organization responsible. So it's I think I'm happy to leave it blank.
Okay, I propose that we leave development organisations blank.
Second.
But that doesn't answer the question of who is going to do the work.
Well, we did talk, everyone is a volunteer effort. It's false, and I agree with Andy to write the fact there's a developing organisation there and that's a risk, but it is actually reality. Like, you know, we're not going to say, oh, we can't have a next AU based ballot just because we don't have a single organisation who has it as a deliverable.
Yeah, because who I put in that box is actually who's doing artifacts at the moment, right, for this round. But it's yeah, that might be expanded too if people were doing other people came in. But it's
you're not in a position to commit CSIRO to do this going into the future. No.
But for this release, I believe there is a commitment for that.
Oh right, yeah, yep.
It's not a CSIRO deliverable. We will disavow that. It is not. It is not on CSIRO to deliver this. It is a dependency, which means obviously there's an implied one, sure, but it is not a CSIRO's or Sparks deliverable.
Okay.
The same's true for the Digital Health Agency. We will do things to make sure it happens, but it's not a deliverable of ours. It's just a thing we need to have.
Well, it's going to be blank or it's going to have my name on it then. So
can we just rename it HIE?
You stirrer. Yep. Okay.
I mean, yeah, so you did say you are an entity, so drop the CSIRO and keep it as Brett, or we leave it blank. I think those are really our two options. I'm comfortable with leaving it blank because I like that highlights the risk.
Yep. Yeah, we've had a suggestion of leaving it blank.
Yep. Shall we put the motion?
Yeah, I heard Richard and Danielle. Would anyone be against that? No. Anyone abstaining? I see none. So we'll call that passed at 15. All right. Cool. So take those amendments. So to round up the amendments, I've got make sure our references are correct, including GHO and extensions pack. Remove developing organisation. Were there others?
And it was be specific on the version of FHIR.
Yeah, be specific on the version of FHIR. Cool. Actually, I should round this out. So it's just obviously downstream related projects that exist at the moment. Backwards compatibility is marked as yes, which is a bold assertion, but I believe that is true.
I
don't think it is.
Yeah, I wouldn't assert that it will be backward compatible. Depends on the changes that would need to come in. I will leave that silent for now.
Okay, let's say.
Well,
NA.
Yeah, or TBD.
Yeah, I guess too. We have no We actually have no backwards compatibility rules because we're working versions in the sense, right? We're still not at that level, really.
Well,
so
you don't know. Yeah. We don't know whether or not any changes coming in will be breaking changes. If they are breaking changes that we need to make, then they won't be backward compatible.
All right.
And I suggest our versioning's wrong because you can't have the last point change and the break backwards compatibility.
Anyway. What are you comparing compatibility with? If you're comparing compatibility with 410, then we're not so much in a problem. So yes, this is backward compatibility to
I'm pretty sure we are.
What?
But Yeah, it'll be 410. So because that's the last actual release. Yeah.
No. Okay. We're going down. Let's ignore the weird version of exactly what version. So the last actual release of AU base is what the comparison is. I actually believe there is a backwards compatibility issue on patient.
Yeah, the comparison should be to the previous balloted content, not to different versions. And I am not 100% confident that there won't be breaking changes.
Well, I think yes. I think that statement's incorrect. So shall we move to NA?
Let's make that statement truthful. Yes. Yeah, let's make that statement truthful. And so the backwards compatibility is no or partial or.
Can't we just take the statement out?
Oh, you do need to put in your PSS. You provide a answer on backwards compatibility. It doesn't mean it has to be the end.
I think
indicate whether or not you expect it to be or not.
I actually take Daniel's point. I think there are backwards compatibility differences, which is reasonable because it's another trial use version. So it doesn't need to be. There's no.
I say make it no then.
Approval. Make it no. So we'll take them in.
Is the previous release officially published? And then you're making breaking changes on it with the next release.
Yes.
Yeah.
I 100% disagree with doing that. But if the reality is if you've done it.
You voted to change.
Yeah, it's it is a trial use version as well, and we're still going to be a trial use version after this.
So both versions are trial. The marked as okay. I mean, once you have a production release, you should never have a breaking change.
Yeah. Maybe show the publication version history page, so people can see what.
No, there is one change. There is in fact, two changes. One, with gender harmony being published, we have replaced the gender identity extension that is called out in AU-based patient. Theoretically, they're both optional. So I guess the question is that backwards compatible or not? I mean, we no longer in AU-base indicate that we don't want to support that older extension. We want you to use the new one. Is that a backwards compatible change?
Yes.
Okay, so then we're backwards compatible.
There's no error. Yeah.
All right.
Previously produced documents will still be valid against this one. They just won't be following recommended best practice.
They will not comply with AU-based variants. You will have to call out that you are not compliant with the expectations of AU-based patients. So you'll be backwards compatible, but you will not be compliant with the expectations.
Yes. Yeah. So backwards compatibility, yes. Backwards compliance, no.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So I must ask, what is the answer? Leave it as yes.
Are the only options yes and no?
And not applicable.
So for AU Core, for example, this is not applicable because we've never had a release
previous version. Core. Yep. Yeah.
I think it's a really bold statement to say you are, frankly.
It's bold.
I don't think it's bold. I think it's a bold statement to say you aren't.
Right. Well, different kinds of boldness, I guess.
Like systems, you don't break software, right? Like Maven repository doesn't break. You don't create breaking changes. That's how you break software. Like your goal should be no breaking changes.
Yeah, but we're in a trial. Yeah, we should. Sure.
Yeah, it's trial use though.
As long as if the prior one is trial use, then fine, because you don't have an official production release. But once you have a production release, a breaking change is another standard. Like it's not a breaking change. No, it's
and there's rules. There's rules on that.
There are rules, and this is actually further complicated by the fact that in the FHIR core spec, there are elements that are normative and there are some that are trial use. The whole thing as a whole, it's kind of courageous to say the thing as a whole is backwards or non-backwards compatible, because it comes down to the specific artifacts. Some of them absolutely can be normative and won't have breaking changes, and others will not. So Brett, do we actually get down to that level in AU base?
Yeah, we have FMM levels on every artifact.
So could we not then say that, you know, that we are backwards compatible insofar as the previously normative artifacts are concerned?
Well, we have
and
no normative
with everything else. Oh,
we have no normative. We have no normative artifacts. We haven't gone past level 3.
And we won't be normative for like 4 years. Everything we're doing is a trial use. I mean, also some of that, Ruben, I think you need to write the process for how we go normative in Australia.
Well, happy to collaboratively do that. But
we've been and I think we're meant to have an FMM discussion, which we will get to. So
if the previous IG and all of its components are trial use, then that you could say that backwards compatibility is not applicable, because backwards compatibility doesn't apply to trial use things.
There's no backwards compatibility rules.
So but that's taking a very high standard of backwards compatibility. So it's saying that backwards compatibility only applies when you've got something that is so stable that if you're not saying yes, you're being really naughty.
Yep, I'd agree with that. Until we have normative content, not applicable is probably the best answer.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the intent was to have, when there were normative breaking changes to be noted, right? Which I think is a much bigger deal and has breaking change rules attached to it once it's normative.
Yeah,
including
I agree.
getting community.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with all that.
Yeah.
Let's hope we remember this next time we vote on such an issue.
Well, we'll have notes, the minutes being taken by Douchey, and I guess we'll update the documentation. So we'll take an action to update the documentation. There's a set of criteria for how to review these PSSs for the work group, and we'll add that statement to it.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. So I take that then as a change to NA for now in our list of changes. Would anyone like to add any further changes?
Were we going to change the stakeholders beyond just the Digital Health Agency?
Yeah, I had the same thought.
So I think we can refer to something similar.
We could put DoHack and Sonic and Halo Connect and Clan William, just reading down the people who are here.
Well, there was another field called, there was something very similar further up. Not stakeholders, but participants or something. Supporting,
yeah.
Which
kind of implies there's
that's kind of different, isn't it?
Yeah.
The problem with stakeholders is very, very broad.
I nicked stakeholders, all the international, well, not all of them, but a bunch of the international PSSs, which listed basically categories of stakeholders.
Yeah.
So I don't see why we wouldn't just do that.
Can I ask, is this acceptable as we've already accepted in the AU core pieces?
I think it's better than just saying Australian Digital Health Agency.
Yeah, I mean they're already listed as a interested organisation. Would people be happy with that?
Do we need to vote?
Would people be unhappy? No, I'm just going to list the amendments and then we'll vote on it. So I think the change would be to use this stakeholder list as appropriate.
Use the same stakeholders as we have for core.
Cool. All right. Was there anything further to add? Nothing too much further. Would anyone like to make a motion with those amendments?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Richard. Danielle second. Anyone against? Yeah, none. Anyone abstaining? No abstentions, so that's 15. That's approved. Thank you very much. That's good. We will get back to these projects again in the near future, as we will have to give a tick to a notice of intent to ballot next. So that'll be next in the sequence. Okay, so I'm going to move on.
I think
Daniel,
we have
did you want to shuffle? Yeah.
Yeah, we have to shuffle.
Yep. Yeah, because we can. Yeah, there's a set of stuff on maturity model, but I think that'll be quite a in-depth discussion.
Yep.
And there's some other items that are kind of probably more pressing.
Item 7 has to be agreed and sort of discussed in this meeting so that the right comes can come out in the FHIR Work Group to the projects. It's related to what we were just talking about.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, this will.
So let's go through that.
Cover it. Do you want to talk to it, Danielle, or do you want me to do it?
Oh, sure, I'm happy to. Let me share my screen. It's related to like projects and project governance. Where's the share button? Here. All right, is that good? Can people see people see this?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, cool. So part of like building out the governance now as the FHIR Work Group, who's really overseeing, I guess, all the projects, and we're just like approving project scope statements, is what we want to do, I think, is have a mid-year project check-in and get the projects that are operating under the FHIR Work Group. So where the FHIR Work Group is that sponsoring work group, and at one of our FHIR Work Group meetings, have them come and do a status check-in, basically back to us. Where are they? What are they up to? What activities have been there? How are they on track or not? And what's been going on? And just have that as one of the means by which we continue to get those contact points from the projects coming into us, but also because I mean, we don't want to do anything crazy, like really frequent like status reports or anything. And there'll be, I think, associated with this a little bit of a PowerPoint template and some comms sent out to the group. For this one, in terms of mid-year, I was thinking the 17th of July for a couple of reasons. One, that's like mid-year. It's far enough away now that we can send out notification to the various projects that are going on, and they have a chance to like get organized and get prepared for that. And it's also before the AGM, so as the FHIR Work Group, also we can report back to the board on the projects that we're overseeing as the sponsoring committee, back to them, back to the AGM and the board. And so the kinds of content I was thinking that we could get information from HL7AU projects are things like kind of the overall status, especially also any PSS kind of changes. So if they highlighted that any of the timeline changes or dependency changes or other things that have been like significant, that's worth noting back to the FHIR Work Group. And from a process perspective, also looking through the FCP activities, so the FHIR community process. So what kind of activities have been undertaken, whether that's like connectathons or committee meetings or workshops or other things. And I guess really outcomes, if they've like produced or released anything, when maybe if they've done any ballot activities, a little summary on how that's gone, like what those overall results are coming back. So that's kind of the thought of what we want to do. And I want to get opinions from people, especially also around like the potential set of topics that we'd be looking for from the project updates. And if people think there's something missing, or if maybe that's too much information than what we're looking for from an update from the projects. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Sounds like a fairly typical set of mid-year reports that we should probably do if we want to be regarded as a fairly typical sort of organisation.
Yeah, I guess it's if there's any other aspects that are kind of useful to know about, because I think overall this is not too onerous a task, because I think, you know, people can report on things that have happened, basically, meetings, events, publications, and, you know, overall kind of things. So yeah, hopefully it's not too much of a problem, but it does give us a bit of a touch point, at least as a work group, to know what's happening, and it does align also. It's very helpful as a bit of a record too, to maybe feed into the AGM meeting for HL7 Australia as well, as a, you know, higher level report on activity.
At the moment, we've got 5 projects, I think, that we're responsible as a work group for. We've got PD, base for e-requesting. Oh no, we've got 6. AU Core Inferno and the HL7AU test data. So that's 6 that are, you know, acting with us as the sponsoring work group. And I think this is just an easy way to get a check-in on where are they, what's going on, what's happened.
Yeah.
And to do it before ballot.
Yep.
All right. I mean,
cool.
And, you know, if we can adjust this as we go, but if no one wants to add anything or take anything off that list, then we can just go forwards and schedule that for that FHIR work group meeting. That's a normal one in July, and just go ahead with it and see how that works for us. Do we need to vote on it, or can we just, or maybe if I just call any objections to going forwards with that? All right, passed with consensus then.
Yeah, cool. That's good. And yeah, we'll get some supporting material for slide decks and things as well, so that people hopefully make that a bit easier for people to have similar structure, at least, on that report. Cool.
Yeah, so just to confirm then, there's actions there on ensuring we've got like a PowerPoint template so people don't have to do all that work themselves. And for the work group co-chairs to send out that email this week to the different projects so that they have, you know, enough notice to come back and report on that. So I'll get those 2 actions, Dushy. Can you put the PowerPoint one on Brett, and we can have the one on sending out the comms on me? That's fine. Okay. Thanks.
Cool. Excellent. That's good. And I think I'd like to go backwards to this search parameters question, because that's kind of, whilst not pressing, it's pretty pressing.
Can I ask then if we actually start the FMM talk and do that with there, because I think we've got some new members of the FHIR work group, as in new who, you know, weren't around when it was called the PA work group. When we were making the FMM decisions, and I think it's a good time to talk about the fact that the FHIR work group in its governance has a responsibility then around endorsing kind of FMM levels for HL7AU artifacts, and do an intro on what that means. And then we've got a request for setting FMM levels for some particular artifacts. So if we could, I think that's a good way to phrase that for our expanded cohort of people.
Yeah, cool. That's good. We'll do that, because we can at least cover this off and put it in people's minds for what needs doing. So as part of our original AU base considerations, we looked at the FHIR maturity model, which is essentially the model used by HSO International with the FHIR specification on how it manages its resource definitions and how those are developed over time. And so with that, there's a set of levels that have been defined, and including some criteria on assessing when an artifact, so when we say an artifact, that in FHIR speak that's a resource, but in our space that's probably profiles and other associated artifacts as part of the implementation guide, and basically being able to assess them for maturity and assign a maturity level to them. So that ranges from a draft level up to a fully normative artifact, which has all of the brings in consequences and sort of cost of change at each level in terms of how things are treated in terms of change and going forward. So we have a modified version of that, which is sort of more turned into the aspect of writing derived profiles and just in operating in an Australian realm decision-making process, and so this is something that has been applied to AU-based content and is being thought about as part of the AU core publication, and I expect we would want this to be part of every publication.
Just to
Brett,
so this.
Yep.
Well, you go, Stephen.
So Brett, I mentioned this in one of the meetings before. There is a risk of causing confusions. If you look at, say, for example, the FHIR resources are patient resources at normative level, practitioner is at sort of FMM level 5. So the way that I understood from the previous discussion that we try to now apply our sort of FMM level on the AU profile, it risks sort of people getting confused that, well, are we making it worse? Say, for example, if we look at our AU core patient profile, we say that, look, is now at level 2. And then people look at international FHIR resource, which is now normative, and then would be scratching their head as to, well, what the hell is happening? So why are we making it less mature? So I think we need to have a way of addressing those kind of confusions.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, and there's some assumptions there. Yeah,
I'm hearing that Stephen is going to write up a change request for AU base for us. This is a valid comment. I'm going to tell us that we need to add some guidance in where we've defined these that covers that. So that
All right.
Yeah, and I'm happy to take that. Yeah, I'm happy to take. Yeah, like I think that's worth having. Some points that are worth making as part of the material, because it's I think some of us that have been working on it kind of like, because I come from a perspective, hey, FHIR R4 is what it is, and I'm not, as an R4 spec, I'm not changing that, so the levels are set for me in terms of the underlying resources, and all I'm really doing is commenting on the maturity of any particular profile, and but that's got to be pretty clear to people, I think, and how to read what we're doing, right? So, and that sort of pans out as to yes, we're going to have maturity levels on AU base material, and then we're going to have maturity levels on AU core and the requesting material, which depend on those AU base profiles and also the normative. Also the
something
content.
that I debated with the FHIR International a lot, not so much on the FMM level, but I sometimes criticize that a resource or a data structure or data definitions within the resource itself is ambiguous and cause confusion. Then the pushback is that, well, by the way, you should read the definition and description and also commentary and conditions of use, and we'll make it clearer. But then the problem is that a lot of people would just take a glance and not necessarily pay the attention to read the details. So my point being that I am okay for us to define a set of maturity level in the context of the profile journey, the AU core, AU based profile journey. But I think there needs to be sufficient distinctions either in the naming of the maturity level or in some kind of guidance. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, I think. And yeah, like I guess, yeah, developing some improvement or suggestions in terms of how that could be better would be helpful. Yeah, so I hear that. Was there any other?
Would it be useful if instead of calling them FMMs, which has got the same as the FHIR one, we said, I don't know, FMMP, FHIR Maturity Model for Profiles or something or other like that?
It's not just profiles, it's artifacts, because it's code systems, value sets. I mean, this is...
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that doesn't lead anywhere useful. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, it could be called AU FMM. We could adopt a different moniker than FMM1.
Yeah.
It could be some
the rules
other
are different.
code.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
And they're things that, in a sense, every national profile is going to want to be able to do something similar.
Andy, did you have a naming suggestion?
AFMM.
That would at least make it clear. Yeah. I think these are all good. Yeah. And I mean, we can, if somebody wants to actually suggest this for a change, maybe not right now, but
there's one problem is it won't work in the tooling. You're allowed to in the tooling redefine what FMM means, and then the extensions, I'm pretty sure, I'll double check that, but the extensions, it's a defined set of values from FHIR that you pick that code for in the FHIR extension, because all of this is handled through the extensions pack, the tooling IG.
Yeah, so you get some stuff for free.
Yeah, because underneath that we haven't actually written the letter 3. It's not text. It's we'll have to take an action to investigate that. Well, actually, you know what? If someone raises the request to change it, then we can take the action to investigate what the tooling requirements would be, and then maybe even take that back to HL7 international tooling if we think in Australia it's sufficiently of interest to get them to change that in the tooling kind of stuff.
Yeah, because that'll be a template thing.
So that maturity level link, that takes you to where? That takes
AU.
You to AU FMM. Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, it's all right for it just to say maturity level there, but these ones here on the left where we've got FMM1, that FMM has to be FMM, I guess, for the tooling to work.
Well, I'm wondering, because that's textual, we could call them AFMMs here, but if you look at the JSON version of the profile, Brett, and look for, like, you can see their value integer, because it's the definition of structure definition dash FMM, and
but I guess that's all technical.
It is. So as long as we do numbers and integers, we probably can label it like that, I think.
All right.
I'm coming around to it. I actually think we can now that I've seen that.
Yeah. So I think that would be a fair suggestion. I would certainly make it probably clearer, maybe less ambiguous, but So just going back to what this means, essentially there's a set of criteria around setting any of these levels, and just as context, effectively the responsible committee for the particular artifact, so the profile or value set or whatever that is under consideration, effectively we'll have be controlling what FMM level in terms of suggesting which FMM level is appropriate for that artifact based on the criteria of the evidence. So it's really up to the responsible committee to be assessing the artifacts they're responsible for and suggesting FMM levels that are appropriate. However, having said that, you can't really set the FMM level to anything above draft without the FHIR Work Group approving it, in terms of the committee responsible supplying the evidence to the FHIR Work Group, and the FHIR Work Group giving it the tick to move up to that level. So the idea is there that we don't get any IGs published anywhere with an FMM level that hasn't been approved by the FHIR Work Group. Richard.
FMM1 says that it has no warnings.
Yep.
Now that means that we can't have tolerated warnings and get to FMM1. And I think that might be a bit restrictive.
We have previously made a statement in the FHIR Work Group, and I'm looking for us to re-endorse what we accept as evidence as meeting FMM1. We have previously made the decision that, like, as you said, there were accepted warnings where the warning is actually due to the tool, not the artifact, and that's like documented and known. And so that was accepted.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to have the words that reflect that. So I think these are all good suggestions to add into if these words need adjusting.
Yeah. So, I mean, something along the line of no warnings that have not been accepted by the responsible working group. That seems to be the sort of meaning, the sort of thing we want. That's clumsy wording, but I think that might be the intent here.
Yeah, and I think too, this kind of assumes the responsible work group for the artifact, is making that decision, and I think effectively that needs to get checked, and I would take that on as the FHIR Work Group needs to check that fact that's being asserted, and it's mainly just a mechanism to prevent FMMs running away in a particular committee, and in terms of letting the committee decide everything. It's also a consistency thing about the FHIR Work Group checking things across different groups, in terms of that they're doing the same sort of things. So primarily it's about a work group can create an artifact into existence, so a TDG can decide, hey, I need an artifact to cover this in the scope of my project. I want to do create a draft level artifact, publish that in their current build, publish that in snapshots if they want to. So there's no, essentially the drafts are fine for the work group to, produce. But if they decide they want to move to FMM1, that needs checking. Effectively that's just that you've got a good build and that's been checked, and the work group thinks that they're, implementable in the sense that, I could run it at a connectathon, I can do things with it. So that's a pretty low bar. And hopefully it should be pretty much a sort of tick approval from the FHIR Work Group that we can say, here's a summary of the QA report. We're happy that it meets the criteria. The work group thinks it's ready, and unless somebody wants to argue that fact, I think we probably just agree that things can move to FMM1, and then you start to look at the other levels, and there's more evidence needed, and maybe that requires some more detailed sort of reporting and content. So primarily it's putting the FHIR Work Group in the middle. Yeah.
For FMM1, I would expect that means we get two things. We get, as the FHIR Work Group, so that some committees we probably get three things. But the QA report will do. So we get the QA report. or a link to the QA report, really. You don't need to actually send the QA report, I presume, at the time. And also link to like records of minutes where the committee has said, yes, we accept that, because what part of the FMM1 requirements, oh yeah, here we go. Part of the FMM1 requirements, if you can scroll down a bit, is that there's a committee decision on it. So that would just be meeting minutes. If we go, these artifacts are FMM1 and that have been taken as a vote in the minutes, and then that would come to the FHIR Work Group to go, yes, that you've got all those things in place, off you go.
So I think this is like so I'm trying to kind of expand on the overall maturity, just stating that this is in the governance pages, in terms of our process, and sort of saying, how that pans out. So I think, this is something I think would be what the FHIR Work Group needs to kind of review and accept that this is their responsibility in terms of what they think they're doing. So I've just tried to do just general advice on what I talked about just now, just in terms of artifacts and changing the FMM level and what's needed, and then noting there's some points where we kind of need to affirm that the FMMs are as we expect in balloting. So there's some points in the balloting process where the FHIR Work Group kind of needs to be able to say, these are the FMMs I expect to see in this publication, and there's some sort of draft level 0 stuff, which is basically committee controlled artifact content, so that can be used in snapshots, but will be marked as drafts. So there's a few sort of technical requirements there, and then the FMM1's level, which we can basically get into details about what you need to have and refer to, and what needs to be minuted, and basically the FHIR Work Group needs to review and approve that. The idea too was, as part of this process, we would put a more formal referral process in as a JIRA ticket to assess this. So the responsible committee would actually raise a ticket for the FHIR Work Group to assess a particular FMM level. So if, say, AECOR decides to put AECOR patient to FMM1, they go, here's my evidence in the ticket. That would be how we pass it across to the FHIR Work Group. The FHIR Work Group would assess it, respond to that, and and accept.
So then there would be
there'd
be 2 tickets then, because so FMM, like, so at the moment stuff's under change control, of course, in AECOR. So when we go to FMM1, there's going to be a JIRA for the AECOR technical design group. Can it be that same JIRA that gets approved, like that shows change required, and then forwarded to the FHIR Work Group to comment the endorsement or not in there?
Yeah, I think the ticket itself just needs to get referred through. So how you want to manage that ticket, I guess, is up to the work group. But if you want to, can have your own ticket and then refer it.
Which we'd want to do, because we need to track the decisions anyway, and link pull requests and everything.
Yeah, and I think this was part of how, like, I think there's a few questions, because it might need we might need its own specific project in because it's not AE based, right? It's other business for the FHIR Work Group. So whether we need a specific project,
because isn't it just a change? Like, it's a change request. It could be handled. Like, currently the FMM for AECOR patient is
you do it on AECOR,
I do a change request to make AECOR patient or a set of artifacts FMM1.
That's better. Yeah, that's better. And then refer that to the FHIR Work Group. FHIR Work Group would okay it and probably assign it back. And then you can apply the changes in which would be an actual IG publication with the new FMM.
Yeah, because the TDG has to approve it first. Then it would go to the FHIR Work Group just to endorse.
Yeah, that's much better. That's good. That's
all right.
good process. Yeah, that leaves everything with the responsible committee. Cool. Yeah, so I think initially, like, there'll be some questions coming on how to do this from AU Core because they want to move up already to FMM1. So that's kind of at least FMM1, and then probably looking to FMM2 later, right? So it's as some of the kind of testing work happens and there's more material there. So yeah, just a flag.
For the minutes left. Oh no, you go, Richard.
Yeah.
In FMM level 1, do you want to say that you changed the status from draft to active?
Yes.
Yeah, because effectively that turns it into.
That's been our convention that we've had in place.
Yeah. It's just that
it doesn't say that. Yeah.
For 0, you explicitly say
I should
draft. So 1
it's missing.
probably say explicitly say draft status is active.
Yeah, that's good.
For sure.
For sure, Richard. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because effectively at this level, we think it's okay to test with, right? Do things with.
So I'm going to try and take this to the AU Core TDG, assuming we've got all our QA, HTML bugs out, or at least on those that aren't, and put to the AU Core TDG to go to FMM1, because I think we're there. I mean, unless anyone knows something I don't at this point or has concerns about it. So then I'll do that and bring that back here. Are there any concerns, comments, or additions from people thinking that if I bring that back, to this group for endorsement, that we've got essentially a record of minutes where those artifacts have been agreed to go to FMM1 by the TDG and a link to the QA.html? Is that enough? I think that's enough, but
I think that's enough. Yeah, because you've just asserted you're happy it's there, which is kind of the committee approval, and then and then the QA is it's the evidence that you need to have. So you'll go, yeah, that looks good. We'll go, yeah, that looks good, and that should be enough, I think, to say yes, you're at FMM1. And I think the difficulty, I think FMM1 is quite a low bar, in terms of it should just be we've seen it, we understand it's good, we'll approve it. So there shouldn't be too much argument, I think, around FMM1. FMM2 is more complicated set of criteria, and it needs more reporting and understanding on and actually assessment on things. But I think the Spark team has some approaches to that which will make our life easier in terms of assessing usage and things like that, which are part of the assessments. So being able to explicitly say these elements were in use and things like that. So
So do we have time to do the test case for AU base, which is doing the search params to FMM1?
Oh yeah, so this is actually an AU base issue. We've got 3 minutes. Let's just at least look at it. So there was an issue that got raised, which hadn't really been considered before, in that there are some search parameters defined in AU base. So there's 3 of them. So and these are things that have happened since the 4.1.0 AU base release. And effectively they are on, there's some search parameters on encounter, discharge disposition, the Indigenous status extension, and the gender identity extension, which has been newly introduced. And those things are actually at the moment marked. Here they are. So there's just the 3 here. These, effectively are just useful search, extended search capability. So if we do have these loaded into a FHIR server, it'll give you the ability to do searches, for these particular purposes. And but one of the notable things is that these are at FMM level 0, and consequently at a draft level artifact, and there was a desire to indicate that those
I think
are
these
now
can
at
go
FMM1.
to. I think these can go to FMM1 now.
Yeah,
they've been reviewed. Heath tested them yesterday in the Sparked reference server, so they work.
We
and
have
the
no
QA.html is clean.
We have no
I
QA
think
problems.
we can go to FMM1 on them.
Yeah. So that was really, they're clean. In fact, the only informational issue we have is that they're at draft, and hey, the standard says it's trial use. Is that a problem? So it's so it's basically essentially that's the QA report for the 3 artifacts, which are clean, and
I'd like to motion
I guess
we
if the group
move
agrees,
to FMM1 for those 3 search parameters.
So do we have to, when we do the publication, in order to get to FMM1, do you have to suppress those things?
Suppress warnings?
They're just informations. Yeah, they're not even warnings.
They're not warnings.
Just information.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there is. Can you
scroll to a warning, Brett, so that we can see what warning, like it says warning and it's different color. Cool.
But if you are going to suppress them, can you show what your suppressed warnings are?
Yeah, we don't have any on AU base at the moment.
Yeah, we turned them off.
Error. We turned it off. So there's a build error that says you're missing. If you click on build errors, we don't have any suppressed warnings at this time.
Oh, there you go. Suppressed messages. So it is something you can do. But we've taken it out to get a clear picture, because a lot of things have changed in terms of tooling as well as
right. But to go to FMM1, we need to put them back in.
Well, we would need to make a decision whether that suppression is valid. If we think it's
if it applied to the case. For these 3 search parameters, it doesn't. There are no warnings and no suppressed warnings either, so it's clean from that perspective.
So it's basically just informational.
For the other cases, Andy, yes, we would need to have the discussion if there were any warnings on why they don't count as warnings against the artifact and are like environment or tooling issues.
So I heard Danielle's motion to accept these for FMM1. I'll just do them as a bulk lot because they are effectively all similar in.
I'll second it, Michael.
Nature. Thank you, Michael. Would anyone be against that? Against anyone abstaining? See no abstentions. So I've got 11 now. For that one. Thanks for that. So that'll be applied as part of updates, and those will move up, and we should be good to go on that. So we've run to time, so we've missed a couple of things, further discussions, additional bindings, discussion. And we'll come back to maturity models, but I think people have got the picture, and we'll probably be looking at more maturity model business. And I would like to get people to confirm the governance material at some point too, in terms of approaches, and make sure we're clearly stating how we would act as a committee in here. And that'd be appreciated as well if people could have a look at it. But I might call an end. We've run to time. Thank you very much for attendance. That was great. We got through most of the things in the long agenda, so much appreciated. See you all.
Cheers, Brett.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, bye.
Cheers.